Welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast, where we explore topics that promote mindset shifts and brain shifts for greater success, health, wellness, and fulfillment. I'm Keith Engelhardt, and I'm chatting today with Jeanette Brown, who describes herself as a founder, storyteller, writer, editor, coach, speaker, blogger, chef, podcaster, and memoirist. She's also the founder of Don'tSumMeUp.com, an online platform to help you overcome your resistance and create your best and most authentic self. And living in the greater Philadelphia area, Jeanette is a female solopreneur with 20 plus years experience in print journalism. Jeanette, welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith. I'm glad to be here.
You share that you're a multi-passionate polymath bound to determine to launch 6 businesses simultaneously around 6 primary areas of expertise that have set hugely audacious goals before and liked where they've gotten you. So what sparked this journey and all those ambitious endeavors?
I have recently tasted freedom. I have been in narcissistically abusive relationships for most of my life, and I was only half alive, and I was not pursuing my passions. And I am so excited to now be making my own choices. And I feel so, it's partly fluid dynamics. I have been silenced and bottled up for 30 years. And I've been thinking the whole time. And I've been living with someone who suggested that my thoughts didn't have value. So I kept them to myself. And now they're all spilling out at once in a huge torrent. And because I'm so alive, I feel like I've woken up from a coma. And it's glorious. And I want it for everyone. And in the process of memoir writing, I found self-care after a life of self-harm, because when I began a journey, which we don't have to get into here, but a very complicated journey of grieving my father, who left me a treasure trove of 60 boxes of primary sources chronicling his whole life from birth. And I thought I was writing a book about him to grieve. But over time, I kept hearing his critical voice in my head telling me I was getting it wrong. I had a lot of trepidation about trying to write a book about my dad. And then I realized my life was in those boxes. And then I realized I was writing a book about me. And I get to tell my story, and nobody can tell me it's wrong. And then I stared down my early childhood, and it was bonkers. The number of adverse childhood experiences, I think is in the double digits. Like the flood, multiple moves, threats of death. My father worked in the coal mines. And our next door, my brother is named Roy because I was 3. I was supposed to pick out his name. But the night before he was born, my father's closest coworker in the mines was killed. And his name was Roy. So my brother is a walking example of the danger of my dad's work. And there just was trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And it gave me compassion for myself, which I'd never had before. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to take care of myself. And it's magical. It's magical. But I had been trying to take care of myself for 30 years, which felt like hitting my head up a brick wall because I kept running into the self-hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started writing memoir and started really looking at my past, not what I had already told it myself it was, or what others had told me it was, but like really figuring it out. Did I find my way to self-care? And I also went to culinary school, and that was also self-care. And I have a little theory. What I'm trying to do now, I'm trying to launch, it kind of changes every day. It's very organic, but I think I'm trying to run an online publication that covers 6 primary beats. And my background is journalism, and I've run online publications, and I sort of know how that works. And I want to cover the beats of memoir writing, self-care, culinary therapy, brain food, which means curiosity and intake of books or video, grief, and gratitude. And those are 6 things that I've spent most of my life really studying up close. And I have a lot of things I want to share with people about how that has helped me, how each of those individual things, and especially all 6 in tandem, but can start with just one, has helped me finally learn how to live a life I love. And I think it's available to anyone who wants it. And everything I write about is free, or can be. So, it's very accessible.
Yeah, when you're sharing there's a lot of it that resonates with my own background and discovery of my family of origin and origins. And then how much intergenerational trauma can roll downhill, so to speak. It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I, was visiting an uncle. I just happened to be vacationing nearby. I was born in Canada in southeastern Ontario, and every once in a while, my wife going up around the east coast of Lake Huron for vacation. It's a little closer than the Atlantic coast, or certainly the Pacific coast. And he happened to be living within miles of where we were staying. So I stopped by because he was dying of cancer. And he shared a autobiography that he wrote about my grandfather on my dad's side, that none of this was shared in family history or anything. There was some pictures and everything else that kind of evolved, but this whole immigration story, I won't go into all the details on the trauma, where he was abducted rather by the Russians at the beginning of World War I, and served captive as a butcher's assistant on a train as it went up through Siberia, down through Persia and Russia, and back in Poland toward the end of World War I. And because of the armistice agreements, countries were divided, and all of a sudden borders shifted, and you were in a different country, and all kinds of stuff like that, which is a form of trauma. Couldn't make a life out of a new start, getting married, having a few kids. So they packed up 3 trunks, immigrated to Canada, landed Halifax. They shipped you wherever there was work. That was out in the middle of Manitoba, where the winters were minus 40 below, wind chills was minus 70, totally different environment, different culture, couldn't speak the language. Survived that ordeal, plus World War I and that immigration journey, the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, World War II, and all the calamities of the first 50 years of the 21st century. And the story goes on. And on my mother's side, she was the oldest of 13. We didn't visit that often because we were one province over in Ontario. But when we did, I had this picture of my grandfather sitting in the corner of the kitchen reading the paper, like, why he's on the floor sitting, because as a kid, you kind of question things. having gone back later as an adult, I realized the little bungalow that they lived in, there was no room anywhere else. And if you think about that, in a family of 13 kids, nobody got their needs met if you were a
Right? No,
child.
totally.
The oldest siblings, which my mother was the oldest of 13, spent most of her youth caretaking of the siblings. But the point being, all those everyday traumas plus the major traumas that the adults experience with the war and the immigration process all ripple downstream with behaviors that we mirror and pick up from families of origin, those ACE experiences and how they accumulate and impact health. The studies are just fascinating on that.
Yeah.
How more likely you are for like disease and mental health issues and all kinds of things. So a journey to explore one's past is very, very revealing and cathartic, because you can understand some of the things you've picked up, because we have, I think it's age 0 to 7, we're in kind of the sponge state that our frontal rational center thinking lobes aren't developed yet, the neocortex, that we pick up everything sort of through osmosis of mirror neurons mirroring what we see as behavior and responses to life from the adults and the people around us. And those are all embodied unconscious patterns and recipes that we're often unaware of and get triggered by all kinds of things. So to your point of the fulfillment and the possibilities, to explore all those things that you have, the door opens for the release of life energy that is spent in that mess that we all inherit to some degree, no matter how healthy we perceive our families, to release it for possibility. In fact, one of my favorite gurus talks about that. When you can explore your life with complete presence, joy, exuberance, and fulfillment, there's all kinds of possibility and we can experience, and certainly a lot more joy, and relates to what the podcast is about: greater success, health, wellness, and fulfillment. The fact that you're a polymath, another way of characterizing that is a multi-potentialite, that we all have far more potential than what we give ourselves or talk ourselves out of, because of all those, unconscious patterns that we're all carrying in our head.
I couldn't agree more. And it's been so dizzying and exhilarating for me, because I have experienced very rapid, significant change. It's like, and so I've been in a bunch of liminal spaces, which has given me perspective. I've been just on the outside. In this process of, I've been in temporary housing for the past year. I've been retracing my steps as part of writing the memoir and going back to places, but with seeing them through a lens. I'm retracing my steps and ghost busting in a lot of ways. I sort of began to realize that it was not conscious. The separation process from my husband has been very complicated and has required that I do a whole bunch of moving around. And so I like to make the best of not great circumstances. And so I turned it into kind of a book tour of places I need to go to write this book. And I then realized that I would just go out and walk, and my feet would lead me to all of the haunted places to look at the truth that I needed to face. I was not raised with faith. I was raised by communist atheists. but I have really felt like higher powers have been guiding this journey that I am on. And it's given me the courage to stop trying to control it. Most of the time, you know, I will feel fearful and try to control something, but so much more of my life is spent just accepting where I am and seeing where it leads me. And it's a magical way to be. And it's very different from how I spent all of my life before. And it's recent. It happened quickly. And I want to share how and why and how other people can have it happen for them too, if they are so interested. Because I really do want it for everyone. It's just a better way of living. I feel so at peace.
Yeah. And
so much of the time.
Sharing that is a very, very powerful, because a great deal of us walk around thinking we're the stranger in the strange land, so to speak, that we're the only ones on the planet that have all this history and baggage, or thoughts, for that matter. I recently posted a post on social media, just because I found it to be an insightful message, and it was a very powerful graphic, because it was this picture of a woman just kind of huddled like this, and kind of churning and spewing out of the top of her head was this black smoke. And I'll see if I can find the quote on it. But it was very powerful. Basically, that the thoughts that we have are have the greatest impact on us, and there's nothing in this world that can trouble us more than our own thoughts, basically. And we often think that we're the only ones that have that, what the yogis call chitta, the whirlwind mind that's constantly churning and churning and churning. And since our brains naturally have a negative bias, because it's part of our problem-solving survival centers of the brain, that it's got a natural negative bias. So it's always churning all the negativities. And it's so powerful that when we can make that shift and reprogram the unconscious, and more importantly, have faith in ourselves, because this biology is amazing. I can eat a banana, I can eat a apple, I can eat an orange, and it turns into a human being. How miraculous is that? And there's an area of our brain, the unconscious, because it's not usually part of our conscious awareness, that's basically the supercomputer. It runs all my biology beyond my control, that I could never master through logical thinking, from digestion to breath and cell replication and so forth. There's this marvelous piece of machinery that we're walking around, and then more importantly, circling back to that chatter in our head, the thoughts, is we're not our thoughts and we're not our feelings. We're embodied consciousness, where we have this level of awareness that can be aware of those thoughts and feelings, and whether they're serving or not serving us, and step back and distance ourselves and experience a different level of reality, actually.
It is astounding, the power of our minds. And I love to be gradually learning more and more how to harness mine. And it's like also neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
The you just, nothing is fixed. Nothing fixed. And I really feel like I wish I had scans of my brain. I know that my brain has healed so remarkably. I consider myself a traumatic brain injury survivor, even though I mean, I did have one fall on my head, but it was mostly thoughts.
Yeah.
But it can be every bit as damaging. And
I love that insight, because we tend to associate traumatic brain injury with a physical impact and whatever, but just as powerful and probably more commonplace is that traumatic brain injury that we induce from our own thinking patterns.
Absolutely. I want to measure it. But I know it's there. And I know, I feel like, and I don't have a measure for this, but I feel like my IQ has increased by double digits since I have recovered, because I can access all of my memory. And for so many years, my memory was locked up in these trauma like mailboxes. And as I process the trauma, I open the mailboxes, and the mailboxes also have, these 50 books I read.
Yeah.
That I thought, I knew I read them, but I couldn't tell you what was in them. And now all of my knowledge has come back into my head in the span of 2 years.
Yeah, it's the access to that, because from my studies with neuroscience is that when we're locked into the stress response, the trauma responses, we're really in the midbrain and primarily the amygdala. And that's our survival, stress, and fight or flight response centers. And when we're engaged there, it's so survival based. So the rest of the brain is basically offline. That memory and all that knowledge and information is accessible, but it's not available because of where the brain is concentrated in that. And when we stay there, the brain scans show that the amygdala literally grows in size, it gains mass. And unfortunately, the areas that do have all that recall, retention, and information and potential and decision making and possibilities and so forth begin to atrophy. Atrophy takes place, because it's like tying your left hand behind your back, only using your right. You're not using the muscle. The body won't put energy into an area that's not being utilized. So it literally shrinks. The good news is that's reversible, as you mentioned, to the neuroplasticity, and we can regain the access at minimum from quietening the amygdala and calming that, and then just opening the doors, so to speak, to access all the opportunity that's there.
I am so excited about the prospect of healing for so many people. It really gives me joy, the advances that are being made, and the better understanding of mind, body, brain healing. And I am so hopeful. There's so many ways to heal, and there's so many people who need healing.
Yeah. And I love one of the things that I picked up from your story in the share and the venues that you've explored. I'm trying to remember where I got this term from, but I love it. It's basically turning your mess into your message.
Yes, absolutely.
And how you can, benefit others just from the sharing and the story and the resonance with that people at minimum become aware that, okay, they're not the solo person on the planet that is experiencing all that. In fact, it's the majority of the population. We're not all mystics on mountaintops that are enlightened and walking around with total exuberance and bliss.
Right. And that,
but it's possible.
It is possible, yeah. But it's not happening. Most of the people who are experiencing that aren't needing to show others. And but it is possible. But so many people are fronting and go walking around in misery and pretending to others that they're not, and orbiting each other in this weird cognitive dissonance that hurts our brain.
And our entire biology, because the research shows now that our thinking patterns impact our physiology, not only just down to the cellular level, but rewire our genes and impact the future generation. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's powerful stuff that I want more people to start tuning into, just because it gives us all so much more power over our own stories. We get to choose how these stories end, and the possibilities are endless.
So I love the title of the website, Don't Sum Me Up. Tell us more about that. Where'd that come from, and what journey are you exploring there for you and others?
Well, my father, I used to joke that my father should have been an editor, but became a coal miner instead and edited every sentence that ever left my mouth. And he also wanted me to get to the point. And he had very little patience for my little girl stories. Like, come on, what is this about? And I got good at getting to the point. And I went to journalism school and did a lot of getting to the point. And I hung in circles that really encouraged getting to the point. But I also know that so many of us have stories we need to tell, and not in the set word count. And I then married someone very much like my father, who not only didn't have it in him to care to listen to me, but he also thought he had me all figured out. And he did not. And I think so many of us experience that in one way or another. Like, and I think unfortunately, a lot of us are summing each other up. But when we do that, we miss big parts of the story. And I always have had a lot of words. Like, I got B's in deportment because I talk too much. And verbosity is a trauma response. And it is just true that I have a lot to say. And I think I'm just saying to the world, look, there's a lot. Come and take what is useful to you, but please don't say I'm just one thing, because I'm not. I can't be. People have tried to suggest to me to be one thing. I am not a one thing person.
Yeah. And first of all, language and words are poor containers for our experience, especially internal experience, because that's all a process on the emotional levels of the brain, which there are few words for, and then even when we can articulate it, it never fully describes the reality. I've used this metaphor before on past podcasts. When I look out the window and see a tree, that doesn't really describe the reality, because what kind of tree is it? Well, it's deciduous or coniferous, and then you go down the different layers. Well, how big are the leaves, the color of the bark, and on, no matter how many ways you slice and dice it with the left brain intellectual mind, it never really fully communicates the reality.
Yep.
And then every person hearing that has their own internalization of the meaning of those words that I'm attempting to, share my reality. So that's why it is so important to have dialogue and discovery in human interaction. I love this term that I picked up from a C.G. Jung conference back in the 80s in Chicago. I forget who the Jungian psychologist was, but her definition of dialogue was mutual self-revelation. And our busy do culture currently usually doesn't create the space for that to occur.
That's so interesting to me, because I realize sort of my journey with a highly critical father who kind of shut me down and helped me contort into myself. to where I am now, telling my story widely, is about I lost my train of thought, which happens when I get to something I'm not quite ready for. Mm-hmm. I've paid attention in my writing and in my speaking, and tangents, and just the way the brain works is fascinating to me.
It's about all these little associations, and something triggers something else, and that's all our memory and recall does. We can leverage actually and in note taking to instead of writing down every word. Tony Buzan had a wonderful process that he brought to awareness. I don't know if he necessarily invented it, called mind mapping, where you just use the keywords and when you make your notes and branch things out, because that's the way all the neurons connect and everything else. Really? So one word triggers another and another and another. The rest of it, the sequential syntax for language, is just the structure that we've created for the English language, and be able to communicate in the written word as a serial sequence. But that's not how the brain works. It works much more holistically and in relationship. And we'll find that, we'll have, we hear a song on the radio and boop, it triggers recall of something back from wherever. And because we hit that little gateway.
In fact, that to me, I've learned how to seek out those bridges, those memory bridges. And I'm going to start teaching memoir classes. And the first one I want to teach is the soundtrack of your life. And you choose songs. And it may not be everyone, but it is definitely me. There are songs that take me to places in my life. And the power of music to transport us through memory is magical. And I think I don't know many people who don't relate to that in some way.
Yeah, it's pretty universal through the human species, because no matter what language or culture we come from, there's a commonality in music. It may vary in structure or sounds and so forth, but we all have that resonance with sound, because in the Hindu tradition there's this concept of Nada Brahma, the sound of God, that the whole universe is this vibrational energy at whatever level we look at it, at the atomic level, the acoustic level, at the spectral light level, everything else. It's this sea of music and energy and vibration. So it's part of us.
Absolutely. And it's healing. And so I think that's part of why it can be so evocative. But I'm not sure that that's the case. The natural movement toward music to heal is universal. And it's also childhood. It's infancy. So much of what soothed us in infancy soothes us as adults. I find myself swaying often. Yeah. And I did have an infant, and so I swayed then. Yeah, but
that's
I
a self-soothing
for a long time.
Technique is to sway. Yeah.
It reminds us of being in the womb. Yeah. And music, we heard beginning in the womb.
We had the music outside that resonates with us. We had the music from inside the physiology, the mother's heart rate, the blood flow, and everything else. Is this whole sea of an orchestration going on. I
I've written that my parents gave me very diverse legacies, and they both were very musical. But my dad was very classical, orchestra, high life. And my mom was all of the amazing vinyl from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I am so grateful for both. And my dad was very judgmental and thought hers didn't count as music, but it did count as music.
Yeah.
But I'm so thrilled to have such range.
Yeah.
And music has been just a critical part of my life. And I think it is for many because it is so healing. I'm trying to get my kids to start singing because I sang throughout from 5th grade on, and it's really healing.
Yeah. And there's some primal sounds. That's where in Eastern traditions, or actually even in Western Christianity, the chanting is so important because it sets up this resonance and vibrational process in our own biology. But one insight that I heard recently is that there's only, when it comes to the human voice, besides it's one of the most healing things that we can do for ourselves is to record affirmations in our own voice and listen to them. Mm-hmm. It's got the right harmonics and frequencies that kind of resonate with us. But there's 3 primal sounds. That's the only 3 sounds that our voice has as a prime. We start, everything else is modulated by the tongue and the lips, but as a primal source, the foundation for everything in speech, singing, whatever, it comes from those 3 primal sounds. I found that fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. So as a fellow foodie and chef, I'm a serious amateur gourmet chef, is what sparked that journey, and how does it all tie into the package of polymath?
Yeah, it's I grew up cooking from a young age, which was feminism. My mom at 8, when I was 9, became the primary breadwinner, and my dad rightly recognized that she shouldn't also be fixing dinner for us every night. And so he proposed that we all share the labor. Mm-hmm. And my brother and I began cooking 2 nights a week then, when I was 9 and he was 6. Of course, my mother was doing a lot of helping on the nights that we were cooking. So in reality, it was my mom kind of cooking dinner and teaching kids how to cook 6 nights a week, mm-hmm. and my dad reheating leftovers the 7th. But my brother and I both love to cook, and it was something special and wonderful that we did together with our mom. And our mom was a really adventurous cook, and she would try anything. So we lived in the coal fields of West Virginia, and I guarantee you we were the only family there eating Indian papadums that she made from scratch. And like we didn't go to restaurants because there were no restaurants where we lived, but she brought restaurants to us. Like they moved from Manhattan to West Virginia, and she loved Manhattan, and so she just created it, and she made her way through cookbooks, and my brother and I were along for the ride, and it was something we shared together, and it's also a memory bridge. Food connects me to my mom. And my mom died when I was 25. And another thing is that she had cancer, and it was 4th stage terminal when it was diagnosed, but she fought for 3 years, and she lived a different life in those 3 years. She lived a life of purpose and joy. And it's tragic that it took a terminal diagnosis for her to prioritize herself, but it was magic to see her do it. And the message that she was sending to me and my brother was, do not wait until you're about to die to do what you want to do. And so she died. I had a tough couple of years. I was a young reporter at Business Week with major imposter syndrome. And I just lost my mom, and I'd become the target of my father's abuse. And I just really floundered. But then I brought myself back together. I got a job. I leaned in and I went to culinary school. And I felt like that was my mom. That was me honoring my mom. And my dad paid for it, which was unheard of. It was very uncharacteristic. It was generosity like he'd never managed before, but it also felt really healing. And then I loved every single second of it because I'm a foodie like you, and I had already been always cooking, and then the Food Network, and I was just glued to it, and it was obsession. And so going to culinary school was just a joy. Like every single minute was fun. And then I worked in restaurants a little bit in and around New York and Philadelphia, but I wanted to have a family, and it's hard to do the restaurant life and have a family. So when I moved to Philadelphia, I shifted back to writing, or I'd always done some writing on the side, and then did private chefing and small scale catering. And going forward, I want to teach myself how to cook, for one, because I don't know how. And I really suck at cooking for myself. And I will skip it, or I'll just and I know I'm not alone. And I want to help solve this problem for myself and invite other singletons who are having trouble feeding themselves well to join me. And likewise, I'm a professional chef and my kids don't know how to cook. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it needs to change.
Yeah.
And so I want to teach my kids how to cook, and I want to invite other families to do it with us, because I know there are a lot of other families that likewise have kids who just don't know. And my poor mom had to it takes extra energy to cook and teach a child, and nobody has extra energy.
Yeah.
And so that's why it falls by the wayside. And that's how we have adults who don't know how to cook. And that's how we have obesity and nutritional challenge. It needs to change. My kids need to learn to cook.
Yeah.
And I want to find a way to make it fun and invite other families to do it with us.
Yeah, because it's circling back to your point about connection. It's a very powerful way to connect with others.
It really is.
Yeah. And there's so many blocks around that, especially with exploring other cuisines. My wife for a number of years taught in the educational system, university, teaching educational professions, basically. Her expertise being early childhood education. And one of the adventures that she often did, and she taught experientially, because that's the only thing that counts. Anything we learn in a book, it's taken on faith, but if we experience it, it's embodied.
100%.
The class had to agree on what cuisine they would explore as a field trip that they've never ventured before. And they agreed on going to Indian restaurant, and I would often tag along. There's one girl that the minute she got to the door to the restaurant, she just froze and was paralyzed with a panic attack, because some of the messages that she got through childhood about food blocked her from experiencing something different. And a little nudge and assuring her that, well, you don't have to eat anything. You don't have to order anything, because all restaurants have, Coke or Pepsi or some beverage that you can order and just, carry on conversation with the others. So she went in, and then another seed planted was all cultures have bread. That's common across anything,
Mm-hmm.
buns, flatbreads, you name it, loaves. There's some sort of bread, whether it's made from rice or wheat or rye or whatever. And Indian culture has this wonderful flatbread called naan. So they started with that, and she sampled it. Oh, that's pretty good, and started eating that, and then never ordered anything, but everybody else ordered kind of family style. And so there's this whole palette of flavors and foods on the table. She started sampling before she realized that she really liked Indian food.
How it happens.
But it was this unconscious fear that had been picked up through whatever messaging or experiencing in childhood. And there's so much we can dissolve as barriers between others, whether it's within our own culture or globally, by exploring food. But it is one of those neural patterns that get set really early, that our palates get trained on what we're exposed to. And then for the folks that unfortunately haven't seen others cook, never learn how, or are curious enough to take the leap to find out. And these days, there's no reason not to. You can find out anything on YouTube on how to make any particular dish. In fact, through the pandemic, I was teaching classes via Zoom on how to make ricotta cheese in 3 minutes with your microwave, and how to make a homemade pasta to pair it up with a nice restaurant quality meal at home.
I love it. Exactly. You can find anything. You can learn anything. It's such an incredible time to be a human.
Yeah.
I'm with you completely. And the palettes being set early, and I had the most wonderful experience just last week. My kids, we had friends from Pennsylvania come visit, and we went to a Smithsonian together. And then one of the moms was Korean, and we went to a Korean restaurant, and she ordered a little of everything. And it was the most delicious table I've ever seen. And my kids, who, if it had just been me, would have maybe had a dumpling, and edamame, because they know, and white rice, had like 4 servings of different things, because there's some peer pressure,
right,
but there's also like, okay, let's try this. And they're not, I think a lot of families get caught in little ruts, where, because like I said, this is the best way to take them. I try to take them and I get some resistance. But the next time I try to take them, it's going to work. So,
those ruts I call comfort cocoons, or cocoons of comfort.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And once in a while, if we're going to grow and evolve, we have to kind of have the faith within ourselves, so that we're going to survive stepping out of that comfort cocoon and exploring something a little different. Because ultimately, I kind of agree with one of my favorite yogis. We're here to evolve. That's one of the greatest crimes we can commit, is not to evolve and explore life.
We are very like-minded. I really love what you're doing, and I love our conversations. They're fascinating to me.
Well, it's been a delight chatting as well. Learned a lot today. Some of your insights around trauma are very profound. One of the ones I paid attention to was that almost everything we do, whether we realize or not, no matter how we characterize it as a plus or a minus, and that's just a judgment of the left mind, because it's all learning opportunities, is that it's based on trauma in disguise. That somehow there's this innate drive to heal the past, so to speak, so that we can truly be in the moment, in the present, with joy, exuberance, and fulfillment, and more importantly, achieve the greater success, health, and wellness and fulfillment that is our unalienable right. So,
it's not seeing other humans doing that.
Yeah. And a good success tip is to spend more time around those people, because we leverage our mirror neurons to mirror that positive influence rather than the
truer words
past.
have never been spoken.
Yeah.
Who you surround yourself with makes such a difference.
Yeah, I think it was Jim Ron rather, got that credit that we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So my follow-up nudge to that is choose wisely.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I am very glad to get to spend time with you.
So any other places that people can find you on the internet other than Don't Sum Me Up?
There's the website, don'tsummeup.com, and then I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, all at Don't Sum Me Up.
Okay, I'll have all that in the podcast notes. So again, thank you for being on the podcast, and I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.